How's it going, guys? It's Cole from See Through Panel, here to talk about Gideon Falls, Book 2, The Eater of All Things, published by Image Comics and retailing for $40 US. This collects issues 17 to 27. So this is the second deluxe edition of the series that is written by Jeff Lemire, drawn by Andrea Sorrentino, and colored by Dave Stewart. As always, I won't be spoiling anything too major. I will be flipping through the book, though, so if you're worried about getting spoiled visually, read the book first, come back after, we can talk about it then. Some of you might have seen my video reviewing the first deluxe edition, and that's roughly half the story. I'm not going to repeat myself too much about that, but I did say in that one that the production quality of the book, while nice, I have a big issue with the binding that appears to be a glued binding to me and results in a ton of gutter loss, even right up on the title page. You can see some gutter loss there. There's a mustache, supposed to be like right there. So you can even see on the title page that it's a pretty big problem to have that much gutter loss. Doesn't affect how I think of the creators of the book. Obviously, they made a really fine product, but the production of this detracts from the story a bit because you're losing a lot of inside art, and there's a lot of big spreads that you just can't tell what is going on. It is very crucial to the story. But other than complaining about that, echoing what I said last time, I'm a big fan of this series even after finishing it. Going to be hard to talk about without getting spoilery, but it does get away from the horror tone that it started with, kind of veering into a high fantasy sci-fi kind of tone. Like here, you can't see the disgusting monster well, can you? It gets away from the horror tone a bit, but I do generally enjoy kind of fantasy in my horror. Like, I like Doctor Sleep by Stephen King. I think that while being much more just kind of like almost high fantasy than The Shining, it works pretty well, and this kind of story takes that turn, I would say. Still keeping some horror elements, but considering the things going on in the larger overarching plot, definitely much higher stakes than I initially anticipated, with just a guy going through trash and having some sort of mental complex about the trash. A washed up priest, all converging into what seems to be a very well planned, well plotted story. He must have known a lot of these beats going in, or else it wouldn't work as well. Things that have been hinted at. It is kind of the Hickman trick. Jonathan Hickman always says to drop little Easter eggs in your story, even if you don't know how you're going to pay them off. Just do it, and you can figure out how to pay them off, and it gives the illusion of just this grand plan. I don't know if that's how Lemire works, but that's how it feels, is that he had an overarching plan. Maybe he was just dropping them and working on them later. Maybe he was dropping hints and he actually knew what he was doing from the get-go. I don't know, but it feels well thought out, well plotted. The pacing is, I think, spot on for a story of this kind, which is kind of a difficult thing to codify the exact genre and pacing, because a horror movie you need to move pretty slow and suspensefully, but in this high fantasy, huge space and time kind of plot that it turns into, you got to move pretty quick. And so he knows when to slow it down, when to speed it up, and some of these panels by Sorrentino are really, really great. And Dave Stewart's work with Red in this book is fantastic. So here we got horror elements for sure, kind of a gross out thing. And yeah, it gets pretty action heavy in this book. It keeps one of the most redeeming things about this book, I think, is the character development and the consistency of his characters. Lemire really feels each of his characters. I think they have a voice of their own that stands apart. If you didn't see them on the page and you just saw their speech bubbles, it's pretty easy to see which character it is just by the way the dialogue is. This is kind of a cool design by Sorrentino. I like that a lot. The smiling man. Bunch of bugs coming out of the head here. And I'm going to keep this video pretty short because I covered a lot of what I want to say in the video about book 1. But I just wanted to come back and say the story ended, I think, as well as it possibly could have for something of this scale. It's definitely very difficult to finish a series like this and have everyone be happy. And I know from what I was reading online, a lot of people were upset with the ending. I personally am not. I think it's a smart ending, and it kind of goes back to the horror roots of the story. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about that ending, but Sorrentino continues to be wonderful to look at and have great cinematic angles and layouts that flow very well but are very unique, very unusual. He still does have this secondary style with much more flat coloring, simple lines, not any shading or anything like that. He takes all the texture out of his original style. As you can see, a lot of ink and a lot of texture going on for everything. Here it's much simpler. And Dave Stewart knows to go with those flat colors to make it really pop out and be a different kind of thing. I also do really enjoy this visual trick, I guess, the kind of horizontal lines going through everything, making it look all split with the red and the black. It's used here too to kind of show the difference. I wouldn't call that an entirely new style like I would call this, but it's kind of just a filter on top of the art. But it does look very good and fitting for the kind of dreamlike, nightmare-like sequences that he uses it for. Overall, I would recommend this book a lot. I want to recommend it to horror fans, but I want to say it's just not straight horror. It's not a slasher flick. It's not a monster flick. It's not the typical thing. I think the closest I can come to comparing it to something is Doctor Sleep, where it just is a kind of horror-focused thing that just goes off the rails and becomes something entirely of its own making. So I really enjoyed the series. I would recommend it to fantasy fans, horror fans, but with the kind of caveat that not all strictly horror fans are going to love this book. Also, just -1 point on whatever random scale I'm using for this glued it looks like a glued binding to me. I'm pretty sure it is. If it's sewn, it's the worst sewn binding I've ever had. I'm trying to get a nice shot of it, but yeah, it just, the gutter loss makes this unreadable. I had to look up. If I was on issue 18, page 12 or something, I would look up Gideon Falls issue 18, page 12 online to get a picture on my phone of the actual page so I could see the middle of the art, which is quite annoying. But overall, the series itself, fantastic. If you could pick up the trades, it's probably a little cleaner of an experience, but you don't get the oversized package or the hardcover for your shelf. But digitally or trades or issues, I would recommend reading this series in. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Peace.